recently moved to a new area where nobody knows me, but more importantly, nobody knows my dead name. We live in an apartment building now, and everyone in my building only knows me as Daisy. Now, there's a lot of really cool and freeing things about that, but the thing that I find the coolest is that it does not matter how I look. It does not matter if I have shaved that day, if I have my makeup done, if I'm wearing a dress, or if I'm dressed like Adam Sandler. People just call me Daisy. They really just don't care, right? There's no difference whether I'm wearing like basketball shorts and a t-shirt or if I'm like done up to go out for the day. Everyone just is like, hi Daisy. Come on, there is a difference. The only difference though is that occasionally my neighbors will ask me where I got my dress. And that's really important to me because at this stage in my transition, even on my best days, I'm still very visibly trans. And I'm proud to be trans, don't get me wrong. It's just nice to be in an area where I don't have to feel like I have to hide anymore.
Good news, everyone! Tonight, trans magic happens. Texas women take a stand. Maine's faith leaders fight for freedom, and more. Good news starts right now. First, following up on our story from a few weeks ago, Trans 12th Night took the stage last weekend. Sir Ian McKellen, seen here introducing the show, was a producer of the all-trans ensemble. As a lover of Shakespeare, as well as a proponent of queer art, it was really great to see one of the most fun shows brought to life from across the Atlantic. The live stream recording is still available to view by video on demand through the venue website, space.org.uk. That's not the only all-trans cast in the news this week. From Pink News. Introducing Dolls, a Lily Wachowski-produced sci-fi thriller with an all-trans women cast. A new sci-fi thriller short film with Matrix co-director Lily Wachowski serving as executive producer features an all-transgender woman cast. The 18-minute film Dolls marks the directorial debut of trans filmmaker Gina Rosero, and the cast includes Yen Sen, Arewa Basit, Macy Rodman, and Vasily, as well as the director herself. Described as a trans-coded take on the 70s cult classic The Stepford Wives, the new film follows Yan, a private investigator who infiltrates a suspicious dating workshop for transgender women after being hired to find a missing girl. Jean, the power-hungry head of the workshop, is rumored to be running a cult. However, she claims she's only helping individuals process relationship problems. But altogether darker forces appear to be at work. Rosero told them, "Dolls is my attempt to birth the internal chatter that ruminates in my head. All those years admiring directors like Claire Denis, Lucretia Martel, and Park Chan-wook, I told myself, give it a shot. It's the only way to find out." And Wachowski said, Dolls is a fever dream reflecting on assimilation and the investigation of trans identity. I'm so proud to be part of this beautiful, weird, striking debut. Pulitzer Prize-winning Susie Ibarra composed a score for the film. Quote, Gina's script and directing bring visuals, sound, and music into a beautiful interplay that creates a unique narrative, Ibarra said. I am honored to collaborate on this unapologetic and much-needed story of transgender women characters in film. The word doll, of course, refers to a trans woman or trans femme non-binary person and is also used as a term of endearment. It has now entered the mainstream lexicon thanks to the Protect the Dolls t-shirts campaign worn by celebrities and others. There is no word yet on when Dolls will be released, but you can bet we will keep you posted. Of course, the event that immediately preceded the opening of Twelfth Night was the London Pride March, and despite the UK media pretending there wasn't a fair-sized city's worth of people filling the streets, it still attracted some notice. From Scene Mag. London Trans Plus Pride 2025, a record-breaking march for rights and recognition. Central London was awash with color, solidarity, and defiance on Saturday as over 100,000 people gathered for the 6th annual London Trans Plus Pride, marking the largest event of its kind in the world to date. The march began at Langham Place near BBC Broadcasting House and wound its way through iconic streets including Regent Street and Trafalgar Square, culminating in a rally at Parliament Square Gardens. The theme of this year's event, Existence and Resistance, reflected the community's growing urgency in the face of recent legal and political developments. Among these speakers was Yasmin Finney, an actress known for her roles in Heartstopper and Doctor Who, who delivered a passionate call for trans visibility and justice. Other speakers included Carolyn Littman, a trans rights campaigner whose daughter tragically died after waiting years for gender-affirming care, and Alex Parmar-Yee of the Trans Plus Solidarity Alliance. The march came just months after the UK Supreme Court's April ruling, which some have interpreted to redefine the legal interpretation of woman and sex with regards to the Equality Act of 2010, to refer strictly to people assigned female at birth. The decision has been widely criticized by trans rights advocates, legal scholars, and people who don't have their head in their ass, who argue it could lead to increased discrimination and exclusion from public spaces, as evidenced by the increased discrimination and sudden, immediate, and violent exclusion from public spaces. Bobby Harding, fundraising lead for London Trans Plus Pride, described the turnout as a total honor, adding, quote, "We are more determined than ever to show up and let people know that we deserve a place on this earth, and we are entitled to dignity and privacy, as is our human right." The Equality and Human Rights Commission, EHRC, has also come under fire for issuing interim guidance suggesting that trans individuals may be barred from using facilities aligned with their gender identity. Critics, including Parmar-Yee, have condemned the lack of transparency and consultation in the process, warning of potentially tragic outcomes. That's a bit of an understatement, as you may recall from our previous reporting. The Law Lord's decision involved consultation from several known identified hate groups and not one trans person or expert in transgender healthcare. Despite overcast skies, the atmosphere was electric, filled with chants, banners, and a palpable sense of unity. The event not only celebrated trans lives, but also served as a powerful protest against what many see as a rollback of hard-won rights. As Louis G. Burton, co-founder of London Trans Plus Pride, put it, quote, "You can try to strip us of our rights, but you can never remove us from society." Transvite adds some additional information. London Trans Plus Pride 2025 brought over 100,000 people to the streets of central London in the largest trans pride event to date. Under the theme Existence and Resistance, the march celebrated trans lives while protesting the ruling of the UK Supreme Court on gender recognition and recent Equality and Human Rights Commission guidance. Speakers, including Yasmin Finney, highlighted the urgent fight for rights and healthcare access. London Trans Plus Pride shattered its own attendance record on Saturday as more than 100,000 people filled central London in a powerful show of visibility and solidarity for trans communities. The largest trans pride demonstration ever recorded worldwide, according to organizers. The march's theme, existence and resistance, framed a day that was as much protest as celebration, coming in the wake of April's UK Supreme Court ruling that legally defines womanhood by assigned sex at birth under equality's law. Organizers and activists framed the turnout as a clear repudiation of intensifying political and legal attacks on trans lives. Among those speaking was Caroline Littman, whose daughter Alice died in 2022 from self-harm after waiting nearly 3 years for gender-affirming health care. A stark reminder that this policy isn't abstract. Delays and rollbacks carry lethal consequences. Her testimony underscored a message repeated throughout the day. Access to timely, compassionate care is non-negotiable. Trans Plus Solidarity Alliance organizer Alex Parma-Yee criticized the recent proposals and draft guidance from the EHRC, warning they risk entrenching discrimination and making essential services harder to reach. The critique reflects a broader backlash to the Supreme Court decision and subsequent policy shifts now rippling through public bodies, changes many fear will legitimize harassment, exclusion from necessary spaces, and an escalation in gender policing, which, it should be noted, has already begun to affect cis women more than any other group. Louis G. Burton, a founding member of London Trans Plus Pride, hailed the march as a message to lawmakers and institutions that the community will not retreat. Pink News reported organizers speaking in similarly urgent terms, stressing the need for a multi-pronged approach from grassroots action to legal advocacy to secure real, durable change. The London event landed amid a broader European Pride season. Berlin hosted one of the continent's largest LGBTQ+ gatherings this weekend, where a small right-wing counter-protest saw arrests, while Amsterdam Pride blended celebration with calls to keep defending GSM rights. The international context matters. UK trans people and allies aren't alone, and the fight against reactionary policy is increasingly transnational. For trans people out there, Saturday was proof that you are not isolated, no matter how loudly institutions try to make you feel invisible. For families and allies, your presence matters in the crowd, at the clinic, in the school meetings, and at the dinner table. Keep showing up. Keep writing to legislators. Keep donating to legal funds and grassroots organizations. The record-breaking numbers weren't just a statistic. They were a promise that this community will continue to exist, resist, and win. In Texas, women are sick of misogyny pretending to be protection from other women, and they're doing something about it. From The Advocate. Coalition of Texas Women declares, "Let us pee in peace," in opposition to Republican bathroom bill. The summer sun had barely cleared the dome of the Texas Capitol when former state senator Wendy Davis took the podium Wednesday morning, framed by the stone columns of the building where she once filibustered for abortion rights in pink sneakers, gaining national attention in 2013. Davis stood before a crowd of women, survivors, GSM advocates, union organizers, and faith leaders, all gathered to reject a new front in Texas's ongoing culture war, House Bill 32. The bill, filed July 14th by Republican State Rep. Valerie Swanson and titled the Texas Women's Privacy Act, would ban transgender people from using restrooms and other sex-segregated public facilities aligned with their gender identity in government buildings, public schools, domestic violence shelters, and prisons. It defines biological sex through chromosomes, anatomy, and the designation on a person's unamended birth certificate. And it goes farther. authorizing civil penalties up to $25,000, inviting lawsuits, and attempting to block Texas courts from even hearing constitutional challenges. Quote, "This bathroom bill is so typical of what we see coming from the legislature when the heat is on them for their own misdeeds," Davis said. "What they want is to divert our attention elsewhere." She added, quote, "I can tell you as a woman that we should be doing everything we can to solve the real problems of this state. We should be standing together and saying, 'Leave our bodies alone. Let us pee in peace.'" She continued, quote, "Let us travel the streets of this state without fear that we are going to be stopped because we may be seeking reproductive health care. Let us have autonomy over our bodies once again. Quite simply, leave us alone and do your job to make sure that we are truly safe." Though Republican Governor Greg Abbott called a special legislative session to address the devastating July 4th floods that killed at least 135 citizens, HB 32 was among the first bills filed, and none mentioned disaster relief. Instead, the bathroom ban swiftly became the session's ideological centerpiece. According to the Movement Advance Project, a nonprofit think tank that tracks GSM policy, 26% of trans people in the United States now live in states where it is illegal for them to use bathrooms and facilities. Texas is now poised to join the 6 states with the broadest such bans, where all government-owned facilities are covered. For those gathered on the Capitol South steps, the cruelty of the legislation was self-evident. Its pretense, protecting women's safety, was not only offensive, they argued, but dangerous. Time and again, the rally speakers called out the hypocrisy of invoking women's bodies to harm another vulnerable group, many of whom are women. Representative Jessica Gonzalez, a chair of the Texas House LGBTQ caucus, delivered a blistering indictment. Quote, "We're done watching our trans community be attacked by politicians who wouldn't last 5 minutes walking in their shoes," she said. "We're done being used as political scapegoats for political gain." To Gonzalez, HB 32 wasn't about public policy or public safety. It was about power. Quote, "They want us to hide. They want us to disappear. But we've got news for them. We aren't going anywhere." State Senator Molly Cook, an emergency room nurse and the first openly LGBTQ+ person elected to the Texas Senate, tied her opposition to her professional oath. Quote, "This bathroom bill will not make anyone safer," she said. "As a nurse, I care deeply about creating safe spaces for everyone. But when Republicans claim that they're protecting women by banning trans people from public restrooms, they're exploiting survivors." Cook said she confronted the Senate sponsor of a similar bill earlier this year and received, quote, "no answer at all for why we need this bill. He stumbled over his words and couldn't even define sex or gender." Her message was clinical and unflinching. Quote, "This is not based in data," she said. "It is based in hate and it is based in cruelty. I would remind viewers that just a few weeks ago, the Utah legislature saw the results of a study they had commissioned seeking exactly this kind of data. And when the data came back saying their concerns were completely unfounded and their efforts were harmful not only to marginalized communities, but the public in general, they swiftly rejected the results of their own study. From the labor movement, Ana Gonzalez of the Texas AFL-CIO, the largest federation of unions, emphasized collective strength. Quote, "Do we really want the government policing who walks into a restroom?" she asked. "That's not only invasive, it's absurd, and it's dangerous." Camilla Factory, a queer Afro-Latina organizer and founder of Black Freedom Factory, placed the moment in a broader historical lineage of legislative harm. Quote, "My rights are being stripped away from me, not by trans women in the bathroom stalls, but in violent house sessions by white cisgender lawmakers," she said. "It is time for us to stand in our privilege the way that trans folks have stood for us for centuries." Fiona Dawson, a domestic violence survivor and LGBTQ+ advocate, spoke from lived experience. Quote, "You'll hear time and time again that there are 0 instances of transgender people attacking anyone in a public restroom," she said. "Meanwhile, violence against women happens at 3 times the rate in their own home." Dawson added, "The real bathroom bill we need is one that protects us from folks who don't wash their hands." Melodia Gutierrez, the Texas state director for the Human Rights Campaign, reminded the crowd that for many, the violence isn't theoretical. Quote, "Let me be very clear. I would not feel safe in a men's restroom, and neither would my transgender sisters like Laverne Cox or Hunter Schafer," she said. "That's not safety. That's cruelty disguised as policy." She framed the bill as a test of values. Quote, "When transgender women are under attack, we all are under attack," she said. "We are safer when we build a world that includes all women." Darcy Calbolero of Planned Parenthood Texas Votes closed the rally with sharp clarity. Quote, "I am not afraid to share space with a trans person," she said. "I'm afraid of politicians who use fear and lies to divide us, distract us, and endanger our neighbors." She punctuated the moment with a declaration aimed squarely at the Capitol behind her. Quote, "You know who doesn't belong in our bathrooms? The state of Texas." Religious leaders in Maine held similar views of hateful laws in their state, this time proposed in the name of religion. From the Maine Monitor. Reverend Gwen Fry realized she was a transgender woman in 1976 as she watched the transgender tennis player Renee Richards fight to compete in the U.S. Open as a woman. Now an Episcopal priest working in Waterville, Fry joined dozens of clergy and religious leaders from across Maine this spring to testify against a slew of bills that aimed, in part, to prevent transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. Quote, "My church and now my state protects the trans community," Fry said in her testimony. "I no longer live in fear to leave my house like I did in Arkansas because of the protections afforded me here in Maine. If these bills pass, we will be taking giant steps backwards, and my small community will experience a return to the same discrimination and oppression I fled moving to Maine." Debate over transgender athletes in Maine garnered national attention this year after Representative Laura Libby of Auburn posted a photograph of a child on social media, and Governor Janet Mills sparred with President Donald Trump at the White House. State legislators introduced 8 bills to prevent transgender youth from using restrooms, as well as to remove gender identity from the Maine Human Rights Act. Oral testimony stretched over 14 hours, and more than 1,200 Mainers submitted written testimony on at least one of the bills. The state legislature ultimately rejected all 8 bills in June, largely along party lines. A Maine Monitor analysis found that roughly 50 clergy members, religious leaders, and other representatives of faith-based groups testified individually on the anti-trans legislation, significantly more than testified on abortion legislation this session. All but 4 opposed the bills, invoking their faith to defend the rights of transgender youth. Quote, Both Hebrew and Christian scripture are super clear about doing justice, said Jane Field, a Presbyterian minister who leads the Maine Council of Churches. Quote, they're also super clear about standing with and for the marginalized, the outcast, the vulnerable. And if there were ever a poster child for someone who's marginalized, outcast, and scapegoated, it's trans youth. Many of the religious leaders who submitted testimony opposing the bills focused on human dignity and compassion for marginalized people. The majority of them were members of the United Church of Christ, or the Episcopal Church, or were Unitarian Universalists. The Maine Council of Churches, a coalition of 7 Protestant denominations, put out a call asking clergy and congregants to testify against the bills from a religious standpoint. Field, from the Maine Council of Churches, wrote that God gave humanity, quote, a rich variety of gender identities and sexual orientations, and said that people of faith have a responsibility to protect the vulnerable and stand with the marginalized, including transgender youth. One Quaker woman wrote that God created people across a gender spectrum. Quote, just as God created day and night, she wrote, he also created dawn and dusk, in between times that are especially beautiful. A retired United Methodist minister wrote in her testimony that she didn't fully understand what being transgender meant. Still, she added, quote, I do understand that transgender people are beloved children of God who deserve to have all the rights and privileges that cisgender people enjoy. Several rabbis also testified against the bills. Jared Sachs, a rabbi in Portland, wrote that his support for transgender people was rooted in Jewish text and tradition. He pointed out references to at least 6 different sex and gender identities from historic Jewish legal codes and rabbinic commentary. Quote, how we treat others, especially those on the fringes of society, is a reflection of our relationship with God, Sachs wrote. Jody Cohen Hayashida, a Unitarian Universalist minister and director of Multi-Faith Justice Maine, a project of Maine People's Alliance, was one of the faith leaders who testified against the legislation. She said she believes the religious right pivoted to mobilizing around transgender issues as a way to rally their base after abortion became a losing issue in the wake of Dobbs versus Jackson. Quote, it didn't really catch hold until they landed on the issue of trans women in sports, she said, because that created internal conflict with people who love children, who love women, who believe every life is sacred and that we should all have equal access, and tried to put that in direct conflict with the humanity of trans people. For her part, Reverend Fry said she found affirmation in Scripture after coming out to her congregation in Little Rock in 2014. The Episcopal Church had updated its canon in 2012 to formally prohibit discrimination in the ordination process on the basis of gender identity and expression. Policy aside, Fry was quickly fired after publicly identifying as a transgender woman. When a clergy friend invited Fry to an intimate service the next Sunday, Fry lost track of the liturgical calendar. She didn't realize until the service began that it centered on the Transfiguration, a moment in the Bible when Jesus reveals his full form to several disciples. Quote, I just sat down in my pew and just started to quietly weep, Fry said. Here I was, going to the church for the first time as Gwen, as my true self. And here's the gospel reading of Jesus disclosing his true self to the 3 who went up the mountain with him. In that gospel, what Jesus told the disciples was, get up, do not be afraid. That has stuck with me ever since. If you enjoy content like this, make sure to subscribe. Transpositions Weekly is the first and only weekly trans news show in the universe, and we need your support to keep this show going. contribute at patreon.com/thetranspositions. Spread the word all over social media to let people know we're here. And tell us what stories matter to you by joining the community on Discord. Discord, of course, is where the memes live, and our meme of the week was posted by Titan Uranus. And if you want your life-saving medical care to come in exciting new flavors, join us. Also, if you have good news concerning trans people you'd like to see reported on, you can tell us about that in the Discord as well. For the Transpositions, I've been Ember Belrad.
There is a part of me that wishes that hateful nonsense still reached the private softness of my heart, because hardening against it has made it harder to feel the deep tragedy of what's happening to us. There are people who see the love that I have for my husband and think of us both as a punchline. Confused lesbians who are deluding ourselves. I know who I am, but I also want to tell you who my husband is. He's a man with more master's degrees than some people have brain cells. And while they rot in the same hometown where they almost made varsity, he left his in his 20s when he could feel like there was something else out there for him. And he built schools in the Dominican Republic. He wrote education software in San Francisco. He took in abused kids in New Mexico, and he chose to start a life with me. And in that life, we graduated past gender. We don't see each other as anything other than ourselves. We're only really men when we're served at Costco, and that's on y'all. If I feel anything right now, it's sad for them. Not even for the hate even, but because they'll never know someone the way I know my husband. They will always have partnerships buried in gendered shit that they don't even see to dig themselves out of. They are in drag right now, and they won't look in a mirror. He's my husband, he's my wife, he's an ocean. He's the sunlight breaking through a canopy of trees like honey in a sieve. And if you reject the miracle of knowing him, that's on you.